The Leading Like a Lady podcast was created to remind Black women, young and old, that acting like a lady is exactly what the world needs in leadership. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email.
We're here today to talk about improving the mental health care and wellness of healthcare workers, protect their well-being, and to nurture them in all. When we talk about our children, I know for this group, we all believe that when we talk about the children of the community, they are the children of the community. And in that way, we should all feel a direct sense of responsibility. Many years ago, I saw firsthand how adverse childhood experiences can have a lasting effect on mental health. And for the District Attorney of San Francisco, I helped launch the Center for Youth Wellness to support children who were dealing with the effects of trauma. And at the California Department of Justice that I named the Bureau of Children's Justice to protect children from the types of trauma that can have to help the children and families of this community and of our country is truly remarkable work.
So in case you haven't heard, Joe Biden, who is the 46th president of the United States, announced on July 21st, 2024, that he is dropping out of the race, not running for a second term as president, and is endorsing Kamala Harris, who is acting as his vice president, as the presumptive nominee for the Democratic ticket in the 2024 presidential elections. Now, a lot of people are celebrating this as the opportunity that Black women have been waiting for such a long time to be at the top of a major party's ticket as the presumptive nominee or as the actual nominee. And of course, as a Black woman, I think it's admirable. I think it's honorable. A lot of people have been thinking about the situation under various contexts. I am specifically thinking about it under the context of something recently that happened in this same month, which was the issue with Sonya Massey. This is going to be my deciding factor on if and how Kamala should win the presidency. And it's related, honestly, to my own personal history with the American mental health welfare system. So we'll get into that in a moment. But just some common hopes and fears that have been expressed online in general since Biden announced that he was out and that Kamala should be in. So a lot of people have been worried about America's history of misogyny and racism and thinking that that means that Kamala may lose, which fair enough. I can totally see why people have that concern. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see specific statistics that show that this is a warranted fear. But then also, clearly, there's people who are very excited about this movement and are rising to the opportunity. Kamala raised the largest amount of money in a 24-hour span for a presidential campaign in U.S. history, or any presidential campaign in U.S. history, according to CBS News, which is great for her. Again, like I said, I am not going to celebrate the fact that a woman or a Black woman is running for president just for the sake of the fact that she is a Black woman. I am going to think about how this is going to have a significant, tangible impact on my life as a Black woman. And I'm doing it under the context, again, of my main concern, which is the incident that happened with Sonya Massey. So in case you haven't heard that name before and don't know about the situation, I will outline it. On July 6th in Springfield, Illinois, Sonya was killed by a white male police officer after she called the police to her home. She was apparently having an episode that could be categorized as being unstable and was probably the result of mental illness. The officer shot her out of quote-unquote fear that she was going to throw hot boiling water on him. And CNN does a really great job of breaking down what happened that led to this escalation of him shooting her and what steps should have actually been taken by the police officer to de-escalate the situation based on the recommendation of mental health specialists. And while, yes, that could be a legitimate fear as a police officer that you would get harmed when answering a 911 emergency call, hello, you are the one that has the weapon that's deadlier than a pot of hot water. So my question in this situation is, why are we reporting on the steps that police officers or law enforcement or whoever who is responding to a 911 emergency call, why are we reporting on the steps that they should be taking retroactively? If there are so many experts who can clearly advise on how to act on these situations, what is going on in the Springfield, Illinois Police Department, why haven't these police officers received the training based on these recommendations that are clearly out there and are not just hopefully appearing for the first time because of this case? I mean, that's a whole other podcast discussion that we can go in depth about. I mean, there's the whole abolitionist movement that just believes that the carceral system in general is just not the place for having these kind of conversations because it is predicated or built on the belief that punishment should happen by force, whether it's deadly force or whether it's by psychological and physical force. So that's a whole nother conversation, right? But given this whole quick summary of the situation that happened with Sonya Massey, and I will have more in-depth details about what happened with her in the description box of this episode, I am just thinking about why we may really need a Black woman as U.S. president, given that this happened yet again to another Black woman. If you're subscribed to my blog, you'll know that in 2021, I had my first and only interaction with mental health institutions in America. It was not a positive one. I'll have the link to the full article for you to read in the description box of this podcast episode so you can see exactly what happened or what I experienced. But suffice it to say, the healthcare workers and police couldn't care less about identifying the root cause of my very, very short and understandable episode. They were more concerned about forcibly placing me into hospitalization, just following their protocol of, whatever they felt needed to be done. And they placed me in facilities that were not clean, with hospital staff that were mean and disrespectful, to say the least, and simply kept forcing me to take medication that was literally tranquilizing me like an animal. Like, I felt so out of my body. Then, when they realized they had incorrectly forced me to be hospitalized, they coerced me to sign a document where I'd relinquished the right to sue them. I got my lick back basically by publishing a revealing article about the way they treated me. But when I hear stories like the one with Sonya Massey, it is triggering and it's worrisome because it's proof that things like what happened to me 3 years ago are continuing to happen, and that can even escalate to the point where a Black woman loses her life because of it. And frankly, I think I'm lucky that I'm still here in spite of what happened to me. And how many countless other Black women are possibly going through the same thing that I went through, the same thing that Sonya Massey went through, but are not getting their stories published anywhere. So what does this have to do with my thoughts on Kamala as a Black woman and becoming president? In a statement that she published on the White House website, I think back in 2022, Kamala talks about how her career as a prosecutor made her realize the importance of mental health care, specifically for children. The San Diego Union Tribe covered what she did specifically and said that this was her approach. She created the Bureau of Children's Justice, which, according to the Bureau's website, is supposed to break down barriers to high-quality, equitable education, conduct investigations to ensure that educational agencies and child welfare authorities protect children and youth in California from abuse and neglect, and make sure youth and juvenile delinquency facilities have access to legally required services, including medical care, etc., to prevent recidivism, or prevent them being incarcerated or locked up again in these centers. It's interesting to me that this approach doesn't say anything explicit about the school-to-prison pipeline and how the financial and emotional instability of adults could also put children in danger, meaning that, it's not just about preventing child abuse by making sure that they have a good school to go to, but also making sure that the adults in charge of taking care of these children actually feel equipped to do so, for example. Also, I find it interesting that the whole approach in general includes the carceral system being used to rehabilitate children who have mental health issues, rather than just having a separate, specific system dedicated to mental health. For the rest of her remarks, Kamala talks about addressing the burnout among medical staff at hospitals by making sure that they have space to express their concerns with how their managers are handling healthcare crises like COVID. And she announces that the Biden administration would use, quote, $200 million to train the next generation of community health workers, including workers who specialize in mental health care and are also a trusted voice in their communities. Now, I'm just going to repeat that again. In 2022, the Biden administration dedicated $200 million to train the next generation of community health workers, including workers who specialize in mental health care and are also a trusted voice in their communities. This was announced in May 2022. In September 2023, the U.S. Health and Human Services Department posted an announcement to their website saying that the funds were now available in the form of grants to behavioral health institutions, who I'm assuming would then train these generation of community health workers. And in 2024, Biden issued an executive order that provided an additional $12 billion in new funding for women's health research specifically. I'm still doing my research on what people or institutions received any of this promised money in the form of a grant and how that money was used to provide humane mental health services to those who needed it, especially Black women. If you are one of those people or know someone who is, please do leave a comment under this episode so we can chat. I genuinely want to hear about your experience with that program and see how the money benefited Black women or other constituents. But clearly, we see with the Sonya Massey case, the ball has been dropped at minimum in Springfield, Illinois. I'm not sure if those police officers or anybody in the healthcare industry in that specific city received any funding or additional training regarding how to deal with mental health care cases. So what do I want to see from Kamala as president, given this incident that happened that reminded me of my very triggering and very unfortunate experience with the carceral system and also the healthcare system in America? If this $200 million in mental health services funding still exists, I want her in either a speech or a debate conversation. Maybe it's not even worth having it in a debate with the other nominee for president, but somewhere I want her to publicly give specific details on how the money was used to stop more incidents like what happened with Sonya Massey and how she wants to ensure as president that those kind of situations don't happen again. If she has no idea yet about how that money has been used but was making a big hurrah about the announcement of its availability, I'm not sure how that keeps Black women like me safe. And I'm not sure how she's going to hold people accountable as president if she has no idea of how those funds were actually used and is not keeping clear tabs on it. Secondly, I need a clearly outlined plan for how she, as a Black woman, will use her position as the leader of the most influential country in the world to fight misogynoir. Yes, she's going to be president of all people in America, not just Black women, but we've seen for at least 240 years that most people, maybe except Black women, Native Americans, and some other marginalized races, haven't really been in danger of murder or discrimination under the past 45 white male presidents. So I need her to emphasize how and why Black women will, maybe for the first time in American history, actually feel protected and served as citizens of this country. Now, this is just part one of my conversation around what expectations I have, realistic or ideal, for Kamala as the first Black woman president. Please leave your comments below on the questions that I brought up, specifically if you are someone or know someone who has received grant funding under that program that I announced or that Kamala Harris announced about improving mental health services. And then also just your thoughts in general about, do we have legitimate fears or concerns about if the country is ready for a Black woman to be president, given its history of misogynoir and racism. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email.